The chain clicks shut around her ankle, 7 months pregnant, chained to a bed, and the man holding the key is her own husband. Every night he locks her up. Every morning he kisses her forehead and asks if she slept well, like it is love, like it is normal. Tonight, the baby stops moving. She begs him to take her to the hospital. He looks at the blood on the sheets, puts the key back in his pocket, walks out, and turns up the television. She is going to die here, chained, alone. Nobody even knows she exists. But here is what her husband does not know. That locket around her neck, the one she has worn since the day she was born, the one he has been desperately trying to hide from the world, carries an engraving that the most powerful people in this country have been searching for 28 years. And tonight, for the first time, someone sees it. Black SUVs are already on their way. But will they arrive in time? Or will she bleed out on that bed, chained like an animal, never knowing that she was never an orphan, never alone, never nothing? What happens next will shock you. And what her husband did when the truth came out is something no one saw coming. Not even him. The chain clicks shut around her ankle. She screams for help. 7 months pregnant, chained to a bed. Every single night, he kisses her forehead before he locks it. Like it is normal. Like it is love. Tonight, something is different. The baby is not moving. She whispers his name, begs him to take her to the hospital. He looks at her stomach, then at the key in his hand, and walks out, closes the door, leaves her there, bleeding alone. What she does not know is that the locket she has worn since birth, the one he has tried so hard to keep hidden from the world, has an engraving on it, an engraving that powerful people have been searching for 28 years. And tonight, someone finally sees it. Black SUVs are already on their way, but will they arrive in time, or will she die never knowing who she really is? Hello, friends. Welcome to our story. Before we start, please like this video, share, and subscribe. Also, tell us in the comments where you are watching from. Is it the United States, London, maybe Canada, Jamaica, South Africa, or anywhere else? We want to know. The sun was dying outside the window, painting the sky in deep shades of red and orange. Inside the small bedroom, at the end of the hallway, Rachel Morgan sat on the edge of the bed, her hands trembling as she placed them on her swollen belly, 7 months pregnant, and her baby kicked as if sensing what was about to happen, as if knowing that night was falling, and with it, the ritual would begin again. She heard his footsteps, heavy, slow, each one like a countdown to something terrible. The door opened. Her husband, Derek Phillips, stood in the doorway, holding the chain. The same chain he had used every single night for the past 6 months. The metal caught the last rays of sunlight coming through the window, gleaming like something alive and hungry. "Time for bed," he said. His voice was calm, too calm, like he was talking about the weather, not about chaining his pregnant wife to a bed frame like an animal. Rachel's heart pounded so hard she thought it might wake the baby. She wanted to run. She wanted to scream, but she had learned months ago that running only made it worse. Screaming only made him angrier, and anger meant the chain would be shorter tomorrow. Meant the food portions would shrink. Meant he would take away the 1 hour she was allowed to sit in the backyard, feeling the sun on her face. "Please," she whispered, her voice barely louder than a breath. "The baby has been kicking differently today. Something feels wrong. Can we just go to the doctor tomorrow, please?" Derek walked toward her, the chain dragging across the floor with a sound that made her skin crawl. That scraping sound. She heard it in her nightmares. She heard it during the day when everything was quiet. It had become the soundtrack of her life. "You know why this is necessary," he said, kneeling beside the bed. His hands were gentle, as he lifted her ankle, and that was the cruelest part. Gentle hands that still locked chains. It is for your own good, for the baby's protection. Protection. He always used that word, as if chains protected anything except his control over her. The cold metal wrapped around her ankle. She felt the familiar weight of it. Heavier than iron, heavier than anything physical could explain. It was the weight of helplessness, the weight of knowing that no matter how much she wanted to leave, she could not. Not like this. Not chained. Click! The padlock snapped shut. Rachel closed her eyes and counted to 10 the way she always did. 1 breath, 2 breaths. Do not cry. Do not give him the satisfaction of seeing you break. Derek stood up, slipping the key into his pocket, right next to her phone and the car keys. Everything she needed to survive, locked away in his pockets every single night. Get some rest, he said, as if he had not just chained her to the bed like a prisoner in her own home. Tomorrow is another day. He kissed her forehead, and she forced herself not to flinch. Then he left the room, closing the door behind him. He did not lock it from the outside. He did not need to. The chain did all the locking for him. Rachel sat there, in the growing darkness, listening to the sound of his footsteps fading down the hallway. Then she heard the television turn on, heard him laughing at something on the screen. Laughing while she sat here, chained and pregnant and terrified. She tried to lie down, but the chain was too short tonight. Shorter than last week. Punishment, maybe, for the look she had given him when he took her phone that morning. So she did what she always did. She sat upright, her back against the wall, one hand on her belly, trying to comfort the baby that kicked and turned inside her. I am sorry, she whispered to her unborn child. I am so sorry you have to live like this. The baby kicked harder, as if answering, as if saying, get us out of here. But how could she escape when she could not even walk to the door? Rachel shifted her weight carefully and slid her fingers along the bed frame to the bolt that anchored the chain. She had noticed it 3 weeks ago. Old metal, a hint of rust around the edges. Every night since, she had worked at it when Derek was asleep. Tiny movements, quarter turns, barely perceptible progress. Tonight, the bolt shifted a fraction more under her fingers, still holding firm, but not as firm as before. She was not just sitting here, waiting to be saved. She was planning, slowly, carefully, in the only way available to a woman chained to a bed with nothing but time and desperation. Under the bathroom floorboard, hidden where Derek never looked, she had stashed a small collection over the past month. A dead flip phone she had found in the junk drawer, a pen, scraps of paper covered in tiny handwriting, documenting every night, every chain, every bruise, every word he said. Not enough to escape, not yet, but proof. Evidence that this nightmare was real. The television droned on. Derek laughed again, and Rachel worked at the bolt in the darkness, counting the rust flakes that fell like tiny promises into her palm. Maggie Collins had lived on Birchwood Lane for 15 years, and in those 15 years, she had learned exactly 3 things about being a good neighbor. First, never comment on someone else's lawn care. Second, always accept the cookies even when they taste terrible. And third, mind your own business. That third rule had served her well through 2 HOA disputes, 1 neighborhood affair, and a spectacular fireworks incident involving the Henderson twins and a case of bottle rockets. But lately, the third rule had been keeping her up at night. Maggie sat on her front porch at 7:30 in the morning, a cigarette in one hand and a cup of coffee in the other, watching the Phillips house the way she had been watching it for 2 years. Not staring, exactly. More like keeping an eye out, the way you watch a pot that you suspect might be about to boil over. The Phillips house was a neat little ranch at the end of the cul-de-sac. White siding, blue shutters, a lawn that Derek kept trimmed to military precision. From the outside, it looked like every other house on the street. Happy, normal, nothing to see here. But Maggie was a retired emergency room nurse, and 30 years in the ER had taught her a fourth thing about life that she wished she did not know. The most dangerous places in the world were not dark alleys or war zones. They were quiet houses with neat lawns where nobody ever heard anything. She had heard things from the Phillips house, sounds at night that did not match a happy home. Not every night, but enough. She had seen Rachel in the summer when sleeves sometimes slipped, revealing bruises and shapes that did not come from bumping into furniture. She had noticed that Rachel never left the house all alone, never had visitors, never talked on the phone in the yard, and she had noticed something else. Rachel was pregnant, clearly far along, and Maggie had never once seen her leave for a doctor's appointment. Colonel Mustard, Maggie's enormous orange tabby cat, jumped onto the porch railing and meowed loudly at the Phillips house, as if he shared her suspicions. "I know," Maggie said to the cat. "I know. She should call someone. She should have called someone months ago. But call and say what? My neighbor seems sad? Her husband seems controlling? Those were not crimes. Those were half the marriages in America." The front door of the Phillips house opened, and Derek walked out, dressed for work. Perfect suit, perfect tie, perfect smile. He waved at Maggie with the easy confidence of a man who believed the world existed for his convenience. "Morning, Maggie. Beautiful day." "Morning, Derek." He got in his car and drove away, and Maggie watched him go, thinking about what she knew and what she suspected, and the vast, dangerous distance between the two. 30 minutes later, she found her excuse. Colonel Mustard had escaped into the Phillips yard again, which he did approximately 3 times a week because he was a cat, and cats recognize no property, boundaries, or human laws. Maggie walked over and rang the doorbell. She waited. Rang again. She was about to leave when the door opened just a crack, and Rachel's face appeared in the gap. She looked exhausted, dark circles under her eyes, her cheekbones sharper than they should have been for a pregnant woman. She was wearing a long-sleeved shirt, despite the warm weather. "Hey, honey," Maggie said, keeping her voice light and easy. "That damn cat of mine got into your yard again. I swear he thinks your garden is his personal bathroom. I keep telling him he is not paying rent over there, but you know cats, terrible listeners." Rachel almost smiled. Almost. It was like watching a light try to turn on in a room where all the bulbs had been removed. "I have not seen him," Rachel said. "But I can look in the back if you want." "Oh, do not trouble yourself. I will grab him. How are you doing, sweetheart? Baby treating you okay?" "Fine. Everything is fine." Everything is fine. The most common lie told by women who were anything but fine. Maggie had heard it 1,000 times in the ER, usually right before someone collapsed or confessed or broke down entirely. Rachel shifted her weight, and the sleeve of her shirt rode up. Just for a second, just enough, Maggie saw the bruise on her wrist, purple and yellow, the kind of bruise that came from fingers gripping too hard, not from bumping a doorframe. Rachel saw her see it. She pulled the sleeve down fast, her eyes going wide with something that looked like fear. "Well," Maggie said, keeping her voice perfectly steady, "you let me know if you need anything, okay? I am right next door. Day or night. Anytime." "Thank you, Maggie. That is very kind." The door closed. Maggie stood on the porch, staring at the white-painted wood, and felt something heavy settle in her chest. She walked back to her house, sat down in her kitchen, and stared at the phone on the wall. She picked it up, put it down, picked it up again, dialed 9, then 1, then stopped. Maybe she was wrong. Maybe Rachel just bruised easily. Some people did, especially when pregnant, Maybe the tiredness was normal. Maybe the isolation was just a private couple being private. Maggie hung up the phone. Maybe it is none of my business, she said to Colonel Mustard, who had materialized on the kitchen counter and was staring at her with an expression that looked remarkably like judgment. She did not call that day, and later she would never forgive herself for that. If you know someone whose partner controls their phone, their food, and their access to the outside world, that is not protection. That is imprisonment. The National Domestic Violence Hotline number is 1-800-79-97233. Save that number. You might save a life. While Rachel sat in her quiet prison and Maggie argued with her conscience, Derek Phillips drove to work with the windows down, singing along to the radio like a man without a single care in the world. But Derek had many cares. He just kept them organized, the same way he kept everything in his life organized, controlled, managed. At the bank where he worked as a regional manager, Derek was considered a rising star, professional, charming, always ready with a joke or a compliment, the kind of man other men wanted to golf with, and women trusted instinctively. He had spent years building this version of himself, polishing it like a piece of furniture until the surface was so smooth that nobody thought to look underneath. He parked in his reserved spot, walked through the lobby with a wave and a smile for the receptionist, and closed his office door behind him. Then he pulled out his personal phone, the one Rachel did not know about, and made a call. The phone rang twice before a nervous voice answered. "Derek, we need to talk." "Good morning to you too, Tom." Tom Weber had been Derek's coworker for 5 years and his reluctant partner in crime for 3. He was a soft man, the kind of person who agreed to things in the moment and spent the next 6 months regretting them. "I am serious," Tom said. "This is getting out of hand. She is pregnant, Derek, very pregnant. What happens when she has the baby and has to go to a hospital? Someone is going to see that locket. She is not going to a hospital." "What do you mean, she's not going to a hospital? She is 7 months pregnant." "I mean, I will handle it. The same way I have handled everything else." There was a long pause on the other end. "You cannot deliver a baby, Derek." "I have been reading about it. People have home births all the time." "You have been reading about it." Tom's voice cracked. "You chain your wife to a bed every night, and you have been reading about home birth. Do you hear yourself?" Derek leaned back in his chair, his jaw tightening. "Tom, let me remind you why you are involved in this. You accessed those sealed trust files for me. You helped me identify her. If this falls apart, you go down too. You understand that, right?" The silence on the other end was answer enough. "So here is what is going to happen," Derek continued, his voice smooth and reasonable, the same voice he used to calm nervous clients at the bank. "Rachel stays home. She has the baby at home. Nobody sees the locket. And when the time is right, we figure out how to access that trust fund. $23 million, Tom. That is what is sitting in that account, waiting for the beneficiary to be identified. The beneficiary being your wife. The beneficiary being a woman who does not even know who she is, who has no family, no connections, no one who will ever come looking for her. I have made sure of that." Derek had not married Rachel Morgan by accident. Nothing in Derek's life happened by accident. 3 years ago, while processing a batch of old estate documents at the bank, Derek had stumbled across something extraordinary, a sealed trust. Established 28 years ago by Justice Robert Harrison, the Chief Justice of the Supreme Court. The trust held $23 million, set aside for a single beneficiary. Harrison's infant daughter, who had been kidnapped from the hospital 3 days after birth and never found. The trust documents included a detailed description of the only identifying marker, a silver locket with the Harrison family's private judicial seal engraved on the inside, one of a kind. Unmistakable to anyone who knew what to look for, Derek had spent 6 months quietly searching for that locket. He found it hanging around the neck of a 25-year-old woman living in a run-down apartment, working as a waitress. A woman with no family, no money, no connections. A woman nobody would miss. He had courted her carefully, patiently, playing the role of the perfect man. Flowers every week, compliments that made her blush. A level of attention and affection that Rachel, who had grown up in foster care without anyone caring about her, could not resist. They married within a year, and then slowly the mask came off. First, he isolated her, moved her to a house in the suburbs where she knew no one, discouraged friendships, took control of the money. Then, he started taking her phone during the day, checking her messages, monitoring her calls. Then the criticism began. She was too fat. She was too thin. She was too loud. She was not grateful enough. By the time he brought home the chain 6 months ago, Rachel was so beaten down, so isolated, so convinced that she was worthless that she barely protested. The chain was not about love or protection or any of the words Derek used to justify it. The chain was about one thing, making absolutely certain that Rachel never went anywhere in public where someone might recognize that locket and connect her to the Harrison family. Because if that happened, Rachel would discover who she was. She would gain access to the trust. She would gain a family. She would gain power, and Derek would lose everything. He hung up the phone, straightened his tie, and headed to a morning meeting, smiling the way he always smiled, polished, confident, completely in control. But control, as Derek was about to discover, was an illusion, and illusions shatter when you least expect them to. The contractions started at 8:47 in the evening. Rachel knew the exact time because she had been staring at the small clock on the nightstand, counting the minutes the way she counted everything now. Minutes until Derek came to check the chain. Minutes until the television went silent. Minutes until she could work at the rusted bolt in the darkness. The first pain was a tightening across her lower back, a band of pressure that wrapped around to her belly and squeezed. She had felt Braxton Hicks contractions before. The practice ones the pregnancy book Derek had grudgingly allowed her to keep described. But this was different. This was sharper, deeper, and it came with a rush of fear that had nothing to do with the pain itself. She was 7 months pregnant. The baby was not due for another 9 weeks. This was too early, much too early. Please, she whispered to her belly, one hand pressing against the hard swell where her daughter shifted restlessly. Please, not now. Not while I am chained. The contraction passed, leaving her breathless and shaking. She waited, counting. 5 minutes later, another one came. Stronger, longer, and with it, a wetness between her legs that made her heart stop. She looked down, blood on the sheets. Not a lot, not yet, but enough to know that something was very wrong. "Derek?" she called, trying to keep her voice calm, trying not to panic, because panic made everything worse. "Derek, I need you. Something is happening." The television volume did not change. He could not hear her, or he was choosing not to hear her. Both options were equally terrifying. "Derek!" Louder now. "Please! The baby! Something is wrong with the baby!" She heard movement in the other room. Footsteps. The door opened, and Derek stood there in his pajamas, his face creased with annoyance. "What is it now? I was just falling asleep." "I am bleeding," Rachel said, "and having contractions. Real ones. I need to go to the hospital. Please." Derek crossed his arms and leaned against the doorframe, studying her the way he might study a spreadsheet that did not add up correctly. "You are not due for 2 months. I know, but this is..." Another contraction hit, cutting off her words. She doubled over as much as the chain would allow, gasping. Tears ran down her face. Derek watched her, just watched, like he was calculating something, running the numbers on risk versus inconvenience. Please, she begged, hating herself for begging but having no other option. Please, Derek, the baby needs help. He walked into the room slowly, stood over her, looked at the blood on the sheets. Then he reached into his pocket. Rachel's heart leaped. He was getting the key. He was going to unlock her, but his hand came out empty. He was just checking that the key was still there. It is probably Braxton Hicks, he said flatly. First time mothers always panic over nothing. Try to get some sleep. This is not nothing. I am bleeding, Derek. Can you not see the blood? A little spotting is normal. I read about it. This is not a little spotting. His eyes went hard, that look she had learned to fear more than the chain itself. I am not driving to the emergency room in the middle of the night because you are having cramps. Do you know what happens at hospitals? Doctors ask questions. They look at things they have no business looking at. His eyes flicked to her neck, to the locket resting against her collarbone. No hospitals. Not until I say so. He turned to leave. Derek, please. Rachel reached out, her fingers grasping at empty air. Please do not leave me like this. I could lose the baby. I could die. He paused at the door. For 1 second, she thought she saw something flicker across his face. Some remnant of human feeling. Then it was gone. Get some sleep, he said. You will feel better in the morning. The door closed. Through the wall, she heard the television volume increase, drowning out whatever sounds she might make. Rachel sat in the darkness, pain rolling through her body in waves. Bo, her daughter, fighting inside her. And she understood with terrible clarity that Derek was not going to help her. Not now. Not ever. If she was going to survive this night, she would have to do it herself. The contractions kept coming. Every 4 minutes now, each one worse than the last. Blood continued to soak the sheets beneath her, and she knew from the pregnancy book that this much blood, this early, meant something had gone very wrong. Placental abruption, maybe? Or something worse. She could feel herself getting weaker. Lightheaded, the room tilting slightly at the edges. But weakness was a luxury she could not afford, not tonight. Rachel shifted her body on the bed, gritting her teeth against the pain, and reached for the bolt that anchored the chain to the bed frame, the bolt she had been working at for 3 weeks. Tiny movements, quarter turns, barely perceptible progress. Tonight she did not have time for tiny movements. She grabbed the chain with both hands and pulled hard. The metal bit into her ankle, grinding against bone, but she did not stop. She braced her feet against the bed frame and used every ounce of strength she had. The bolt groaned, shifted, but held. Another contraction hit, and she screamed. She could not help it. The pain was everywhere, consuming, total, and she screamed into the darkness, and no one came. When the contraction passed, she pulled again, and again. Her ankle was bleeding now, the skin torn where the metal dug in. Her arms were shaking. Her vision was starting to blur. One more pull. Just one more. And then she heard it. Not the bolt giving way. Not Derek's footsteps. Something else entirely. A doorbell. Persistent. Urgent. Ringing again and again. And then a voice. Old, familiar. Fierce. I know the difference between a movie scream and a real one, Derek. Open this door right now or I am calling the police. And if you think I am bluffing, you have clearly never met a retired ER nurse with a bad attitude and a fully charged phone. Maggie. Rachel heard Derek's footsteps, quick and angry. Heard the front door open. Heard his voice, smooth and pleasant, the mask sliding into place. Maggie, everything is fine. Rachel is just watching a horror movie. A horror movie. At 9 o'clock at night, while 7 months pregnant. She has unusual taste in entertainment, and I have unusual hearing. I can tell the difference between surround sound and a woman screaming for her life. Let me see her. Now. I'm afraid she is already asleep. Then wake her up. Through the pain, through the fog, Rachel summoned everything she had left. She grabbed the chain, planted her feet, and pulled with a strength she did not know she possessed. The bolt ripped free from the bed frame. The chain fell loose, still attached to her ankle, but no longer anchoring her to anything. She was free, at least free enough to move. She could not stand. Too much blood loss, too much pain. So she crawled, inch by agonizing inch, dragging the chain behind her, leaving bloody handprints on the hallway carpet. At the front door, Derek was blocking Maggie's view, his body filling the doorway, his voice getting sharper. "This is my home. I am asking you to leave. And I am asking you to step aside. I am calling 911, Derek, right now. You are making a mistake. You have no idea what—" "Help?" One word. Rachel's voice was barely a whisper, but the hallway carried it like a bell. Derek spun around. His face went white when he saw her, saw the blood, saw the chain trailing behind her like a terrible secret dragged into the light. Maggie pushed past him. This tiny woman, barely 5 feet tall, cigarette still smoldering between her fingers, took one look at Rachel on the floor and became the ER nurse she had been for 30 years. "Oh, honey," she breathed. Then her voice went steel. "Derek, you get away from her right now. You back up, and you do not move." "This is not what it looks like," Derek started. "It looks like your pregnant wife is bleeding on the floor with a chain on her ankle. You want to explain to me what else it could possibly look like?" She was already dialing. 911, I need an ambulance at 417 Birchwood Lane. Pregnant woman, severe bleeding, possible placental abruption. And send police. The husband has been keeping her chained. Yes, I said chained. Like an animal. Hurry. If you ever hear something that does not sound right from a neighbor's house, trust your instinct. One phone call can save a life. You do not need proof. You do not need to be sure. The professionals will figure it out. All you need to do is call. The sirens came fast, cutting through the night like a knife. Red and blue lights turned the quiet cul-de-sac into a scene from a crime show, and Rachel drifted in and out of consciousness on the hallway floor, Maggie's hand gripping hers, Maggie's voice steady and calm above her. "Stay with me, Rachel. Ambulance is 2 minutes out. Stay with me." Rachel tried to focus, tried to hold on, but the darkness kept pulling at her, warm and painless and so much easier than fighting. She heard the paramedics arrive, felt strong hands lifting her onto a stretcher. The cold rain hitting her face as they carried her to the ambulance, shocking her back to awareness just long enough to see Derek being held back by 2 police officers. "That is my wife," he was shouting. "You cannot take my wife. I have rights. I am her husband." "Sir, you need to calm down. She is lying. She is dramatic. She does this for attention." The mask was gone now, completely gone, and the thing underneath it was ugly and desperate and afraid. Then the ambulance doors closed, and Rachel was moving, the siren screaming above her, a young paramedic with kind eyes leaning over her. "You are going to be okay. My name is Jessica. I need you to stay awake for me. Can you tell me about your baby? Have you picked a name?" Rachel had not let herself pick a name. Derek had told her it was bad luck. But Derek had been the bad luck all along. "Grace," Rachel whispered. "I want to name her Grace." "That is beautiful. Grace is going to be just fine. You both are." But Rachel could see the worry behind Jessica's smile. Could see the way her eyes kept darting to the blood pressure monitor, to the blood-soaked sheets. The hospital was a blur. Bright lights overhead, rushing past so fast they became streaks, voices urgent and overlapping. Female, late 20s, 31 weeks pregnant. Severe placental abruption. Evidence of long-term physical abuse. Malnutrition. Chain marks on the left ankle. Get her to OR now. And then one voice cut through all the rest. Sharp. Startled. Different from the medical urgency surrounding it. Wait. Look at this. Look at her necklace. Rachel felt hands at her throat. Not rough, but urgent, fingers lifting the silver locket she had worn her entire life. That engraving, someone said. I know that engraving. What are you talking about? We need to operate now. That is the Harrison Judicial Seal, the private one. My husband worked the Harrison kidnapping case 20 years ago. I would recognize that symbol anywhere. Are you sure? I am absolutely sure. Somebody needs to call the Chief Justice's office. What? Why would we? Just do it. Trust me. Do it now. Then there was nothing but darkness and the distant sound of her own heartbeat, slowing, and the terrible, beautiful sound of her daughter's first cry cutting through the void like a blade of light. Rachel woke to white walls and beeping machines and the strange sensation of being in a body that had been through a war. She was alive, and somewhere close by, a baby was crying. Grace, she whispered, trying to sit up. Pain shot through her abdomen, fierce and immediate. Surgery. She had had surgery. She could feel the stitches, the deep ache of being put back together. A nurse appeared, older woman, gray hair, professional but warm. You are awake? How are you feeling? My baby, where is my baby? Your daughter is in the NICU. She is small. 3 pounds, 2 ounces. But she is a fighter. The doctors say her prognosis is good. A daughter. She had a daughter. Can I see her? Soon. You lost a lot of blood. You need to rest first. But I can show you a picture. The nurse held up a tablet, and Rachel saw her. Tiny. So tiny she barely looked real. Surrounded by wires and monitors, in a clear incubator, but alive. Pink and alive, and breathing. Grace. She is beautiful, Rachel whispered. She is. Now, I need to ask you some standard questions about your injuries, about how you got them. Is that okay? Rachel told her everything. The chain, the starvation, the isolation, the phone taken every day, the medical care denied for 6 months. She told it calmly, factually, the way you describe a car accident after the shock has passed. The nurse's hand shook as she wrote it down. You said you are an orphan, the nurse said, carefully, when Rachel finished. That you have no family. That is what I have always been told. Well, the nurse hesitated, seeming to choose her words with extreme care. That might not be entirely accurate. Before Rachel could ask what she meant, the door opened. A man walked in, and the air in the room changed. He was tall, late 50s, with gray hair and a face that looked like it had been carved from granite. He wore an expensive suit, perfectly tailored, and carried himself with an authority that filled every corner of the space. But it was his eyes that made Rachel stop breathing. She knew those eyes. She saw them every time she looked in a mirror. Who are you? Rachel asked. The man's hands were trembling. This powerful man, who stood like he commanded armies, was trembling. 28 years ago, he said quietly, my daughter was taken from me. Stolen from the hospital when she was 3 days old. We searched for years, decades. We never stopped looking. Rachel's heart was hammering. But we knew one thing, he continued. We knew that whoever took her also took a locket, a family heirloom that my wife had placed around the baby's neck the night before she was stolen. His eyes dropped to Rachel's throat, a silver locket with the Harrison judicial seal. One of a kind. The room was tilting. This could not be real. My name is Robert Harrison, the man said. I am the Chief Justice of the Supreme Court, and I believe you are my daughter. The DNA test came back in 24 hours. 99.9% match. Rachel Morgan was not an orphan. She was Rachel Harrison, the daughter of the most powerful judge in America, stolen from a hospital nursery 28 years ago and hidden in the foster care system by people whose names and motives were still unknown. In the span of one night, Rachel went from having nothing to having everything. A father who wept when he held her hand, a family name that carried weight in every courtroom in the country, a trust fund worth $23 million that had been sitting in a bank waiting for her for nearly 3 decades, and a lawyer. Claire Ashford walked into Rachel's hospital room 2 days after the DNA results. With the confidence of a woman who had never lost a fight, she cared about winning. I am your attorney, Claire said, pulling a chair close. Your father retained my services, and before you say you cannot afford me, his money is his business. Your business is telling me everything about Derek Phillips, so I can make sure he never comes within 100 feet of you or your daughter again. Rachel told her everything, again, for the 3rd time, and Claire wrote it down with a hand that did not shake, though her jaw got tighter with every detail. He will fight this, Claire said. Men like Derek do not give up control willingly. He will use every tool available to him, the courts, the media, your past, anything he can twist into a weapon. I know. Are you ready for that? Rachel looked through the window toward the NICU wing, where her 3-pound daughter was learning how to breathe on her own. Yes. 3 days later, Derek filed his counterstrike. Emergency custody petition claiming Rachel was mentally unstable and a danger to her child. A complaint alleging Justice Harrison was using his influence to kidnap Derek's family. A motion to seal Rachel's medical records. Claire was not surprised. Textbook abuser, playbook, attack the victim's credibility before she can establish her own narrative. The emergency hearing was scheduled for the next morning, but when Rachel and Claire arrived at the courthouse, they discovered something that made Claire's face go pale for the first time. The judge assigned to the case was William Crawford. Claire knew the name. Crawford owed favors to the law firm representing Derek. Not officially, not provably, but the kind of quiet professional courtesies that shaped outcomes in courtrooms across the country. Derek's team was masterful. Derek himself was a revelation, sitting at the defense table in a modest suit, his hair neatly combed, his expression one of heartbroken concern. He dabbed at his eyes with a handkerchief when he spoke about his daughter. His voice trembled when he described his wife's episodes. Your Honor, his lead attorney said, my client used the restraint as a last resort to prevent his wife from harming herself during severe psychological episodes. He was trying to find appropriate psychiatric care. He is a devoted husband who is being targeted by powerful people, attempting to separate him from his family. Derek took the stand and delivered a performance that could have won an Oscar. I love my wife, he said, tears running down his face, actual tears. Rachel watched them fall and felt a chill run through her entire body. Everything I did was to protect her, to protect our baby, and now these people with money and power and connections I could never compete with, they are trying to take my family away from me. Claire cross-examined him sharply, presenting the medical records, the photographs of Rachel's injuries, the chain itself sealed in an evidence bag. But Judge Crawford seemed unmoved. He barely glanced at the evidence photos. He sustained nearly every objection from Derek's team, and when Claire protested, he warned her about theatrics in his courtroom. Rachel watched it happening, watched the system that was supposed to protect her bend and flex under the weight of connections and favors and the quiet corruption that lived in the spaces between laws. Then Crawford issued his ruling: temporary visitation rights granted to the father, supervised visits in the NICU twice weekly, pending full evaluation. Rachel felt like she had been shot. Derek was going to be allowed near her baby, near Grace. The man who had chained her, starved her, nearly killed them both, was going to walk into the NICU and hold her daughter. She screamed in the courtroom. She could not help it. The sound came from somewhere primal, somewhere beyond words or dignity or courtroom decorum. Claire grabbed her arm. Rachel, Rachel, listen to me. We appeal. We go to a different judge. This is not over. But Derek walked past her on his way out, leaned close enough that only she could hear. I told you, he whispered. No one believes you. You are nothing. Outside the courthouse, Rachel broke down completely. Claire held her while she sobbed, and Justice Harrison stood by, his face a mask of fury so controlled it was terrifying. That judge, he said quietly, will answer for this. Not through your office, Claire said firmly. Through the proper channels. The last thing we need is any appearance of judicial interference. Then make the proper channels work, Claire. Make them work fast. Abusers do not just use fists. They use systems, courts, doctors, employers, anything they can manipulate. If you are in this situation, document everything. Dates, times, photographs of injuries. Hide copies where your abuser cannot find them. Evidence is your shield when the system tries to fail you. The appeal took 1 week to prepare. During that week, 3 things happened that nearly destroyed Rachel completely. The first catastrophe arrived at 3 a.m. on a Tuesday. Rachel's phone, the new one her father had given her, buzzed with a text from an unknown number. You think you have won? You think money and power make you safe? I am going to destroy you, and when I am done, you will wish you had stayed chained. She blocked the number. Another text came from a different number, 30 seconds later. Our daughter belongs to me. You belong to me, and I always get what is mine. She blocked that one too. Then she sat in the dark, her hands shaking, the old fear flooding back like poison in her veins. Even with a restraining order, even with police, even with the Chief Justice of the Supreme Court on her side, Derek could reach her. He would always find a way to reach her. She did not sleep that night. The second catastrophe was louder. It arrived the next morning in the form of a headline splashed across every news site in the country. Leaked. Chief Justice Harrison's lost daughter has criminal record, arrested for shoplifting at 16 in foster care. Derek's legal team had somehow obtained Rachel's sealed juvenile record and leaked it to the press. The arrest was real. When Rachel was 16, living in a group home, she had stolen a winter coat from a thrift store because she did not have one, and it was January and she was cold. She had been arrested, given a warning, and the record was sealed because she was a minor. But sealed records, Rachel was learning, meant nothing when powerful people wanted them opened. The article did not mention the context, did not mention the group home or the January cold or the fact that a 16-year-old girl had been so desperate for basic warmth that she risked everything for a second-hand coat. Instead, it painted her as troubled, dishonest, the kind of woman who would fabricate abuse to gain access to a wealthy family. By noon, the hashtag #GoldDiggerRachel was trending on 3 social media platforms. Strangers on the internet debated whether she had chained herself for the payout. A television host with perfect teeth and no apparent conscience said on air, "Is it not convenient that she discovers she has a rich father right when she needs to escape her marriage? Rachel stopped reading the comments after someone wrote, "She probably put those bruises on herself for the cameras." Claire called, "Stop looking at your phone. The internet is a cesspool. We fight this in court, not in comment sections. They're calling me a liar. They do not know you. The judge will know you. The jury will know you. That is all that matters." But it was not all that mattered, because Rachel's credibility, her public image, the narrative of who she was and what had happened to her, was being rewritten by people who had never met her, and that narrative would follow her into every courtroom, every hearing, every legal proceeding for the rest of this fight. The third catastrophe was the worst. It happened on a Thursday afternoon, while Rachel was meeting with Claire to prepare for the appeal, while Justice Harrison was on the phone with his security team discussing the threatening messages. Derek walked into the hospital. He had visitation rights, Judge Crawford's order. The staff could not stop him. But he did not just visit. He waited until the NICU nurse stepped away for supplies. Then he took out his phone and photographed baby Grace in her incubator. Tiny, fragile, 3 weeks old, still connected to monitors and feeding tubes. He posted the photo on social media with a caption that Rachel would never forget as long as she lived. "My daughter. They will not let me hold her. Is this justice?" The photo went viral within hours, 2 million shares by evening. The comments were a war zone. Half the people calling Derek a concerned father being kept from his child. The other half seeing through the performance. But the damage was done. Rachel saw the photo on her phone and felt something inside her crack. Not break, crack. Like a windshield hit by a rock. The kind of damage that spreads slowly outward until suddenly the whole thing shatters. Her baby. Her tiny, vulnerable, fighting baby. Used as a prop. Used as a weapon in Derek's campaign to own her. She locked herself in the hospital bathroom and sat on the floor and stared at the wall and thought, for the first time, about giving up, not hurting herself, but surrendering, signing whatever papers Derek wanted, letting him win, just to make it stop. She sat there for a long time, long enough that Claire came looking for her. "Rachel, are you in there?" Silence. "Rachel, open the door." More silence. "Rachel, I know what happened. I saw the photo, and I know what you are thinking. You are thinking it might be easier to stop fighting." The bathroom was quiet. I know because I thought the same thing once, a long time ago. Before I became a lawyer, before I became the person I am now, there was a man who made me feel exactly the way Derek makes you feel. Small, worthless. Like the fighting was pointless because he would always find a way to win. Rachel heard Claire's voice crack, just slightly, just enough. He did not win, Rachel. I am standing here in a $3,000 suit with a law degree and a win record that makes opposing counsel lose sleep at night. He did not win, and Derek will not win either, but only if you open this door. Rachel opened the door. Claire looked at her with red-rimmed eyes that she would never acknowledge or explain further. Good. Now let us go destroy him. The appeal hearing was held on a Monday, in a different courthouse, before a different judge, Judge Patricia Stern, a woman in her 60s with a reputation for thoroughness and an extremely low tolerance for what she called legal theatrics. Claire had spent the weekend building something larger than a custody case, because the custody case, she had realized, was just the surface. Underneath it was a conspiracy that went back 28 years. It started with Tom Weber. Tom had been getting progressively more terrified as Derek's legal situation deteriorated. The threatening messages Derek had sent Rachel were a violation of the restraining order. The NICU photo stunt was a potential contempt charge. And Tom knew, better than anyone, that if investigators looked closely enough at Derek's finances, they would find the trail that led back to the sealed trust documents he had helped Derek access illegally. So Tom made a deal, full cooperation in exchange for reduced charges, and what Tom revealed blew the case wide open. Derek had not found Rachel by accident. He had been hired. 3 years ago, a man named Arthur Keene had contacted Derek through an intermediary and offered him $200,000 to locate a woman wearing a specific locket. Find her, marry her, keep her hidden, make sure no one ever connected her to the Harrison family. Arthur Keene. The name meant nothing to Rachel, but it meant everything to her father. Arthur Keene had been a law clerk in Justice Harrison's office 28 years ago, young, ambitious, and bitterly resentful of the man he worked for. When Harrison passed him over for a promotion, Keene's resentment curdled into something darker. He hired 2 men to take the baby from the hospital nursery. He intended to hold the child for ransom, to use her as leverage to force Harrison to resign. But the plan went wrong. The kidnapping drew national attention, FBI involvement, a massive manhunt. Keene panicked. He could not return the baby without being caught, could not keep her without being found. So he made a different choice. He gave the baby to someone he trusted, someone who would raise her quietly, far from anyone who might recognize the locket or the face that would eventually look so much like her father's. He gave her to a nun named Sister Catherine, whose real name was Catherine Keene, his sister. When Detective Lisa Marsh presented this information to the appeal court, the room went silent. Not the polite silence of a courtroom waiting for a ruling. The absolute silence of people processing something they could not quite believe. "Let me make sure I understand," Judge Stern said slowly. "You are telling me that the respondent, Derek Phillips, was part of a 28-year conspiracy to keep the petitioner, Rachel Morgan Harrison, hidden from her family, that he married her specifically to maintain control of her identity, and that the abuse, the chain, the isolation, all of it was designed not just to control her as a partner, but to prevent anyone from discovering who she really is." "That is correct, Your Honor," Claire said. The chain was not a symptom of domestic violence. It was a tool of an ongoing criminal conspiracy. Derek Phillips chained his wife to a bed every night because he was being paid to keep her hidden. And when she became pregnant, when the possibility of a hospital visit threatened to expose the locket, he escalated his control to the point where he was willing to let her and their child die rather than risk discovery. Claire paused, letting the weight of it settle. He chose money over his wife's life. He chose money over his own daughter's life. And now he is asking this court to give him custody of that daughter. Derek's lead attorney attempted a response, but there was nothing left to say. The evidence was overwhelming. Tom Weber's testimony, the financial records showing payments from Keene to Derek, the sealed trust documents accessed illegally, the phone records showing Derek called Tom on the night Rachel went into labor, a 14-minute conversation during which Rachel was hemorrhaging and screaming for help. And Derek told Tom, "She is bleeding, but I am not taking her in. If they see the locket at the hospital, it is over." Judge Stern's ruling was swift and absolute. Appeal denied. Previous custody order stands. Full custody to the mother. The restraining order against Derek Phillips is made permanent. Furthermore, I am referring this matter to the federal prosecutor for criminal charges, including conspiracy to kidnap, aggravated assault, unlawful imprisonment, and child endangerment. Bailiff, please take Mr. Phillips into custody. Derek stood. His mask was gone. The charm, the tears, the wounded husband performance, all of it stripped away, leaving nothing but rage and desperation. "This is not over," he shouted as officers moved toward him. "You cannot do this. She is mine. She belongs to me." "Mr. Phillips," Judge Stern said, her voice like ice, "no human being belongs to another. That is precisely the principle upon which this nation's justice system was built. Take him away." As Derek was led from the courtroom in handcuffs, he turned to look at Rachel one last time. But this time, she did not look away. She held his gaze and let him see what was in her eyes. Not fear, not hatred, not even anger. Nothing. She felt nothing for him anymore. And that nothing, that absolute void where his power over her used to live, was the most liberating thing she had ever experienced. The criminal trial took place 4 months later. 4 months during which Rachel learned what it meant to live without fear. It did not happen overnight. Freedom was not a switch you flipped. It was more like a slow thaw after a long winter. First, the ice cracked, then water trickled through. Then, one morning, you woke up and realized you could breathe without checking whether someone was watching. Rachel learned to sleep without listening for footsteps. She learned to eat without counting calories or bracing for criticism. She learned to leave a room without asking permission and to use her phone without the sick certainty that someone would take it away. She spent hours in the NICU, then the intermediate care unit, watching Grace grow stronger. 3 pounds became 4. 4 became 5. The tubes came out one by one. The monitors beeped less urgently. And one afternoon, 6 weeks after her birth, Grace opened her eyes and looked directly at her mother with an expression of calm curiosity, as if to say, "So this is the world. It seems fine." "She is doing remarkably well," Dr. Reeves told Rachel. "Better than we expected. She is a fighter." "Like her mother," Justice Harrison said from the doorway. Rachel was still getting used to having a father. It was strange and wonderful and heartbreaking all at once. This man who had spent 28 years searching for her showed up at the hospital every day, sometimes just to sit in silence beside Grace's incubator, watching his granddaughter breathe. He told Rachel about her mother, Eleanor Harrison, who had been a civil rights attorney before her daughter was stolen and who had died of heart failure 6 months later. "The doctors called it cardiac arrest," Robert said one evening, his voice heavy, "but I knew what it really was. Her heart broke, literally and completely. She died believing we would find you. Her last words were, 'Keep looking.'" Rachel touched the locket at her throat. "She put this on me? The night you were born. She said every Harrison woman should carry the seal, that it would protect you." He paused. "It took 28 years, but she was right." When the trial date arrived, Rachel was ready, not just legally, but personally. Claire had built an airtight case, supported by Detective Marsh's investigation, Tom Weber's testimony, and a mountain of physical evidence that Derek's legal team could not explain away. The trial lasted 5 days. Day 1, the prosecution laid out the conspiracy, Arthur Keene's role in the kidnapping, Derek's recruitment to find and control Rachel, the payments, the sealed trust, the calculated destruction of a woman's autonomy for profit. Day 2, medical experts testified about Rachel's injuries, the malnutrition, the healed fractures, the chain marks on her ankle, permanent scars she would carry for the rest of her life. An OBGYN explained that the placental abruption was almost certainly caused by prolonged stress and inadequate prenatal care. Day 3 was Rachel's testimony. She walked to the witness stand on legs that only trembled slightly, sat down, and told the truth. The whole truth, calmly, clearly, without flinching. She told them about the chain, about the food rationing, about the phone confiscated every morning, about the night she went into labor and begged for help while Derek turned up the television. Derek's lawyer tried to shake her. Is it not true that you were arrested at 16 for shoplifting? Rachel did not flinch. Yes. I stole a winter coat from a thrift store because I was living in a group home and did not have one. I was 16 years old. I was cold. Is that really the best you have got? The courtroom reacted. Even the judge had to suppress something that might have been a smile. Derek's lawyer sat down. Day 4, Claire delivered her closing argument. The defense wants you to believe that Rachel Harrison is a liar, a gold digger, a troubled woman who cannot be trusted. But the evidence tells a different story. The chain tells a different story. The medical records tell a different story. The 28-year conspiracy to keep a stolen child hidden from her family tells a different story. Derek Phillips is not a husband, he is a warden. And it is time to lock his door. Day 5, the jury deliberated for 2 hours and 14 minutes. Guilty on all counts. Conspiracy, aggravated assault, unlawful imprisonment, child endangerment, fraud. Derek Phillips. 18 years federal prison. Arthur Keene, arrested in Florida 2 months earlier. 25 years. Tom Weber, 5 years with possibility of parole. Judge William Crawford, who had granted Derek visitation, investigated and removed from the bench for judicial misconduct. Rachel sat in the courtroom when the verdict was read and felt something she had not expected. Not triumph, not joy, not even relief, just a vast, quiet emptiness where the fear used to be, like walking into a room where someone has finally turned off a noise you had been hearing for so long you forgot it was there. As Derek was led away in handcuffs, he turned to look at her one last time. But there was no threat in his eyes now, no promise, just the hollow stare of a man who had built everything on control and had lost it all. Rachel watched him go. Then she stood up, walked out of the courthouse into the sunlight, and did something she had not done in years. She took a deep breath, a real one, the kind that fills your whole chest and lifts your shoulders and makes you feel like the air is clean and the world is wide, and you can go anywhere you want. Grace was waiting for her at home, her daughter, now 4 months old, healthy and growing, and completely unaware of the storm that had surrounded her birth. Robert was there too, holding his granddaughter with the careful tenderness of a man making up for 28 years of lost time. And Maggie was on the porch next door, smoking a cigarette. Colonel Mustard sprawled across her lap. She waved when she saw Rachel's car pull up. "How did it go?" she called. "Guilty," Rachel said. "All counts." Maggie took a long drag on her cigarette, nodded once, and said, "Good. Now come have some coffee. That cat has been driving me crazy all morning. I think he missed you." Rachel laughed, a real laugh, the kind she had not been sure she was still capable of producing. 6 months after the trial, Rachel stood in the garden of the small house on her father's property and watched Grace take her first steps. Wobbly, uncertain, ridiculous steps. Grace made it 3 paces before falling on her padded bottom with a look of genuine indignation. Then she got up and tried again. "Stubborn," Robert said from his chair on the patio, a cup of tea balanced on his knee. She definitely inherited that. "From which side of the family?" Rachel asked. "Both, probably." Rachel smiled. It still amazed her sometimes how natural this felt, having a father, having Sunday mornings on the patio, having someone who cared where she was and how she was doing, not to control her, but simply because they loved her. She had built a life in these 6 months, not the life she had imagined when she was younger, not the fairy tale rescue she had secretly hoped for in the darkest nights of her marriage. Something better, something real. She was enrolled in the social work program at the State University. Online classes mostly, so she could be with Grace, but she attended in-person lectures twice a week, leaving Grace with Robert, who had turned out to be the kind of grandfather who read bedtime stories with different voices for every character and let the baby grab his glasses without complaint. She had started the Grace Foundation with funding from the trust and donations that poured in after the trial. A nonprofit providing legal aid, emergency housing, and job training for women escaping domestic abuse. Claire Ashford sat on the board. Maggie volunteered at the shelter on weekends, terrorizing everyone with her bluntness and her cigarette smoke and her absolute refusal to let any woman in her care feel sorry for herself for 1 second longer than necessary. "You survived," Maggie would tell them. The same thing she had told Rachel. That is the hardest part. Everything after this is just living. Detective Lisa Marsh had become an unlikely friend. She stopped by for dinner sometimes, bringing case files she probably should not have shared and a dry sense of humor that Rachel had come to appreciate. "You know," Lisa said one evening, watching Grace methodically destroy a bowl of mashed peas, "most people who go through what you went through, they want to forget. They want to put it behind them and never look at it again. You started a foundation." "I do not want anyone else to go through what I went through," Rachel said. "And the women who are going through it right now, I want them to know that someone sees them." That is exactly what Maggie said when she called 911 that night. "Maggie saved my life. Maggie made a phone call. You saved your own life. You loosened that bolt. You crawled to the door. You testified in court. You built this." Lisa gestured at the house, at Grace, at the life Rachel had constructed from the wreckage of the one Derek had tried to destroy. Give yourself some credit. Something Rachel was still learning to do, but she was getting better at it. It was late October when the letter arrived. No return address. Plain white envelope. Inside, a single photograph. Old. Faded at the edges. The kind of photo taken on a disposable camera 20 or 30 years ago. It showed a young woman, maybe 25, smiling at the camera. She wore the simple clothes of a religious order. Her face was familiar, in the way that faces from childhood are familiar, not quite matching the memory, but close enough to make your chest ache. Sister Catherine, the woman who had raised Rachel until she was 12, the woman who had given her the only love she had known before Grace was born. Standing next to Sister Catherine, his arm around her shoulder, grinning like they shared a secret, was a man Rachel had never seen before. She turned the photo over. On the back, in handwritten letters, "She did not find you on the church steps, Rachel. She was given you. Ask your father what really happened to his law clerk's sister. Ask him why Sister Catherine's real name was Catherine Keene." Rachel read it 3 times. Catherine Keene, Arthur Keene's sister, the woman who had raised her, the woman who had told her bedtime stories and taught her to read and braided her hair and said, on her deathbed, "Some truths are hidden to keep children alive. When the time is right, everything will be revealed." That woman was the kidnapper's sister. She had not rescued Rachel from church steps. She had been part of the plan. She had raised Rachel as her assignment, keeping her hidden in plain sight, making sure the locket stayed around her neck. Insurance. A bargaining chip in case the Keene family ever needed leverage against Justice Harrison. Every memory Rachel had of kindness, of being tucked in at night, of warm hands and gentle words, and the feeling that maybe someone in this world actually loved her, all of it shifted. Not disappeared, shifted. Because the love had felt real. Had it been real? Could love given for the wrong reasons still count? Rachel did not know. She might never know. She sat at the kitchen table for a long time, staring at the photograph. Grace was asleep in the next room. The house was quiet. Outside, October wind moved through the trees, scattering leaves across the garden. Her phone rang. "Rachel?" Detective Marsh's voice was tight. controlled, the voice she used when something was serious. "We need to talk. We found a storage unit registered to Sister Catherine." "Your Sister Catherine. It was paid up through last year." Inside there were documents. A lot of documents. "What kind of documents?" A pause. "Letters. Between Catherine Keene and her brother, going back 28 years. Rachel, there is more to this story than any of us realized. I think we are only seeing the surface." Rachel closed her eyes, took a breath, thought about the chain that used to lock around her ankle every night, thought about how she had believed for so long that freedom meant simply removing that chain. But freedom was not a single moment. It was not a verdict or a divorce paper or a restraining order. Freedom was a choice you made every single day, the choice to keep going, the choice to face the truth, even when the truth was ugly and complicated and refused to fit neatly into the story you had told yourself. "I will be there in an hour," Rachel said. She hung up, walked to Grace's room, stood in the doorway, watching her daughter sleep, this tiny, perfect person who did not know about chains or conspiracies or the terrible things people did to each other, who knew only warmth and milk and the sound of her mother's voice. "I am going to figure this out," Rachel whispered. "All of it, every last secret. And when you are old enough, I am going to tell you the truth, the real truth. Not the version that is comfortable, not the version that makes everyone look good. The real one." Grace shifted in her sleep, her tiny hand curling around the edge of her blanket. Rachel touched the locket at her throat, the same locket that had been placed there 28 years ago by a mother she would never meet. The locket that had survived kidnapping and foster care and a marriage built on lies and a night of blood and chains and the impossible distance between who she had been and who she was becoming. She left it on. She would always leave it on, not because of what it represented, the Harrison family, the trust fund, the legacy, but because it was proof. Proof that even in the very beginning, when she was 3 days old and the world was about to go dark, someone had loved her enough to leave her something worth finding. Rachel picked up her keys, walked to the door, paused. Then she looked back at the photograph still lying on the kitchen table. Sister Catherine's face, smiling, hiding secrets that would take decades to surface. "You told me some truths are hidden to keep children alive," Rachel said to the photo. "But I am not a child anymore." She walked out into the October evening, got in her car, and drove toward whatever was coming next. Behind her, the house was warm and bright and safe. Her daughter was sleeping. Her father was a phone call away. Her life was her own, truly her own, for the first time in 28 years. The chain was gone, the cage was open, and Rachel Harrison, who had once been told she was nothing, who had once believed it, who had once lain bleeding on a hallway floor and thought she would die without anyone knowing or caring, drove into the darkness with her eyes wide open and her hands steady on the wheel. She was not afraid, not anymore. If Rachel had no family, no money, no phone, and nowhere to run, would you have stayed silent too? Let us know in the comments. Kindly like, share, and subscribe. Comment where you are watching from and your thoughts. Which part got to you the most? 1 in 4 women in America will experience domestic violence in their lifetime. If you see something, say something. You might be someone's Maggie. The National Domestic Violence Hotline number is 1-800-799-7233. That call could change everything. Part 2 is coming. And trust us, you are not ready. Thank you, and we will see you in the next video. This is not just a story. This is a reminder that no one is nothing, that the people who try to make you feel small are the ones who are afraid of how powerful you really are. And that one phone call, one moment of courage, one neighbor who refuses to look away can change everything. If this story moves you, if it makes you think of someone who needs to hear it, share it. Hit that like button. Leave a comment telling us where you are watching from and which moment hit you the hardest. And if you have not subscribed yet, join this family so you never miss a story that matters. This content was carefully researched, developed, and manually edited by our team to deliver meaningful stories with real lessons. Every word was crafted with purpose because we believe storytelling should not just entertain. It should leave you thinking long after the screen goes dark.